Breaking news into CBS Sports HQ. While there are no Big Ten battles this Saturday, we know when there will be. The conference releasing its Week 1 schedule and beyond this morning. Here's a look at some of the notable matchups on the slate. Leading it off with Nebraska and Ohio State, October 24th for kickoff. Ohio State the following week. Get a big-time matchup with Penn State. Michigan, Ohio State, always one to keep an eye on. That's coming your way December 12th. And we do have some questions to ask here about Nebraska's schedule and the way things have played out. Let's welcome in one of our best, Tom Fornelli, joining us to break down the Big Ten. Tom, we were talking a little bit off air here. You know, who ended up on the short end of the stick? Who does this benefit? But let's start with short end of the stick here. Nebraska, taking note of their actions, let's say the Big Ten is over the last couple weeks here. What have you made of their schedule moving forward?
Yeah, it almost seems like the Big Ten might be mad at Nebraska, because if we think back to the Big Ten's history before the last month, before it originally postponed its season and all the kind of backroom infighting became public, this was a conference that no matter what they agreed on or disagreed on, they always presented a united front. But when they made the decision to, postpone the fall season, Nebraska was very vocal right from the start about how it did not agree with the decision. And now here we are a month later, the Big Ten's releasing its schedule, and we find that Nebraska's 3 of its first 4 games, it opens the season on the road against Ohio State. The next week, it's getting Penn State or Wisconsin. And then after a tough road trip at Northwestern, then they come back with Penn State. Those are 3 very difficult games for Nebraska to start the season with, especially if you look at Scott Frost, who's entering the 2nd season of his tenure with the Cornhuskers, who really, has been kind of disappointing to this point, has not been the savior that the Cornhuskers were hoping him to be. And now we're looking at a situation where Nebraska could easily be 1-3 after the first 4 games, and that's just going to increase the pressure on Frost. So I feel like the Big Ten is somewhat sending a message to one of its newer members like, hey, we're happy you're still here and we're glad to have you, but maybe get in line from now on.
I know the Husker faithful are looking for some results as they move forward in Frost's tenure, but we got to go to the top of the conference here, Tom. When you're looking at some of the big-time players, when you're talking about Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, the way that the schedule shakes out for them, any notables here?
I think I'm really excited to see Ohio State, Penn State on Halloween, what'll be the 2nd week of the Big Ten season. I think that's a huge matchup simply because if we look at the conference, the way it stacks up coming into this season, and it's going to be a strange season playing so many games in such a short amount of time and starting at a later date, I still think that Ohio State is clearly the favorite in the Big Ten. If the Big Ten is going to get a team in the playoff this year, once again, it is most likely going to be Ohio State. But Penn State really does look like the number 2 team behind the Buckeyes and the team that could really compete with them for the conference title. So to have those 2 meeting in the 2nd week of the season, I think that kind of introduces us to the Big Ten. And if it's a weird start, it's kind of awkward to get with. Throwing that on the 2nd week of the schedule kind of gets the juices flowing early and will make it feel like more of a real season and like this is really happening and they're back. And I think that the winner of that game is going to have a leg up on everybody else into at least getting to the Big Ten championship. So it's a huge game right off the bat. And then other than that, if you look at Ohio State and Michigan, I know it's really important. The Big Ten has always stressed wanting those 2 teams to play at the end of the season. It's a huge game. It's one of the biggest games in the country, not just the Big Ten. But I do worry that by putting it so late in the season this year, considering we don't know what's going to happen, and we have seen so many games postponed already from the conferences that are playing, I do worry about putting that game towards the end. I think I might have put it earlier in the schedule, so that way if something happened, I might have some wiggle room to get it in later and make sure that game is played. So to me, that's somewhat of a concern, but I'm still, hopeful that everybody's going to be able to get these games in, particularly that game.
Yeah, that flexibility you speak of there is not something the Big Ten has afforded themselves with pushing everything back here. There's not even going to be a bye week between the final week of the Big Ten season and the Big Ten championship game. They will also be up against it when you look forward towards the playoff if they do have a team in the playoff. Just from terms of an attrition rate here, this is oftentimes a black and blue conference, Tom. When you're looking at what this does from a competitive advantage standpoint, the Big Ten being behind the 8 ball and having to play from behind here, not having those weeks at the end of the season, not just for scheduling mishaps, but for getting the body right as you move towards the playoffs and bowl games. Is the Big Ten at a competitive disadvantage from the angle that they're coming at this thing?
I think it can be because, yeah, attrition is going to be a huge battle because if you're playing week in and week out and with just the weird kind of run up to the season. Now, the good news for the Big Ten is, well, like schools in the Pac-12 had to completely stop practicing because of regulations in their home states. The Big Ten, even after it canceled the fall season originally, did keep practicing and going through a training camp situation. So hopefully the players are going to be in better condition to start the season than we might have seen somewhere else across the country. But playing week after week, this is a sport that takes its toll on everybody. And if there's no rest time between games, that's going to hurt every single team. So I think in the Big Ten, in the conference race, that's probably going to play to the more talented, deeper rosters as it is, as they have more viable backups to replace anybody that gets hurt. But yeah, once we get to the end of the season, if Ohio State does win the Big Ten and it does get to the playoff, or it's Penn State or it's Michigan or Wisconsin or whoever it might be, I do think that they could be at a bit of a disadvantage because of that, because they've played continuously for the 2.5 months beforehand, and they're not really going to get a time to recuperate before that game. But I guess on that end, maybe you can hope a couple of your games are postponed just to rest and get players healthy.
You can check out that full Big Ten schedule at CBSSports.com right now. Tom Fornelli, thanks for breaking it all down. And stay put. We got winning wagers on the way coming up at the top of the hour with Tom. For more, be sure to download and subscribe the Cover 3 podcast. Our hosts of analysis and experts in college football get you in the know each and every week. It's a moving goalpost, folks, but our guys keep you up to date. Download and subscribe to the Cover 3 podcast.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.